So I promised a number of you a video about some of the classic mistakes in this program, and I think this may be beneficial for everybody, so we'll wander through it. So what I have here is I've just written get sentences using the code from the assignment, and I've written it in such a way that it passes, it does everything it's supposed to do. So if we run sentences, we can see the adult slept, etc. And I have written test sentences, and it also passes and does what it's supposed to do. So if I had turned these in, this would get 93 points, full credit, because I've done everything I'm supposed to do. They meet the requirements. But there are some problems with both of them in terms of good programming practice. All right? So let's start off with the test sentences. You may remember you had to write test get prepositional phrase, and I can't remember, there may have been some discussion about how it was supposed to be written or what it was supposed to accomplish, but basically there's two things you can do with test get prepositional phrase. You can make sure you got 3 words back, which would be preposition, determiner, noun, and then you can check to make sure that the words do in fact exist in prepositions, determiners, and nouns. And I don't think anybody did this, but test get prepositional phrase takes a quantity, so I tested it with both quantities just for the sake of completeness, but these tests are exactly alike. So maybe that's the first thing we should look at, because we're going to see this many times. Since the only difference between this set of lines right there and this set of lines right here is the quantity, I could probably collapse this a little. And so, let's see, how could we collapse this? How about if we said 4 words in single nouns? Oh, in fact, we'll do a compound list. Plural nouns too, like that. And so this needs to be words count get get prepositional phrase count. That shouldn't be words because I'm already using words down here, so let's call this word list. And I forgot the colon at the end. Phrase equals get preposition words, assert lang, preposition, noun, preposition. Oops, so I also need single determiners there, and plural determiners there. So we'll do that so that line isn't so long. Okay, so I need to rename this to noun list, determiner list. And now those lines are too long again, so we'll wrap that there so they're not too long. Okay, get prepositional phrase, words, lang words, preposition, determiner, noun, assert preposition in prepositions, assert determiner in, so now I have to say determiner list, assert noun in noun list, and so At a slight increase in complexity, I had to write a loop, had to figure out what values go in the two sublists for that loop, and then I had to replace variables in here for the different constants that I had before. But that allows me to write that list without duplicating as much code. All right. And yes, it is true that, let's see. Nope, that's still too long. All right, put it back like that. It is true that it's more complicated. I had to do a little more thinking, but programmatically it's cleaner. I only have one code body here instead of two. Now, the other thing that's immediately obvious here is if you look at the number of combinations you can have for get prepositional phrase, it's combinations of all of these. In 4 times, we're only going to try a few of those combinations. Actually, we ought to check and make sure this still works, shouldn't we? Okay, still works. That's good. All right. But this is a probabilistic test. Get prepositional phrase calls random functions. And so we really ought to run this more times to make sure we've exercised more possible combinations. Now you'll notice by doing that, it hasn't changed the time much, okay? In fact, in absolute terms, that's indistinguishable, really. So it takes more time to set up pytest.main than it does to run this 400 times. Of course, having done that, then we might say that, okay, determiners, there's only 2 of them, running it 4 times makes fine. But nouns, there's a whole bunch more of them. So maybe we should run that. Let's just take it straight to 400, okay? Verb, same thing. Lots of combinations, take it to 400. Get preposition, just take it to 400. Now we may see a time difference now. Okay, that's starting to be a little bit significant, but it's still not very long. 13/100ths of a second versus 10/100ths of a second. Didn't take very long. So that's one way to make this test better, is just to test more combinations. But there's one more thing you might notice here. Let's take, for example, the single determiners list. Okay, I'm referring to it there, but it's also there. What happens if I decide to add another determiner? So that would be over here in get sentences, right? The 1A. Let's suppose I wanted to add A there. See, that doesn't work too well because the plural of A is also some. Well, all right. So we've got 3 singular determiners and 2 plural determiners. Well, now, if I've changed my function so it has more capability, notice that my test fails because I'm not getting, I forgot to add that to my test. So now I have to come over here and I have to remember to add, let's see, I have to add A there, but I've got to add it down here too, right? And so I had to make 3 changes total to support 1 conceptual change. Let's suppose I add another noun. We'll do couch. Okay, since I'm a basic couch potato. Again, oh, my test passed. So that suggests, oh, I added it on my test, not on the function, idiot. Okay, sorry. Should have been over here. Get noun, should have added couch, not conch, couch. Okay, and now my test should fail. Right, because Ooh, test get noun passed. Interesting. So it never happened to pick couch out of this list. And 400 times it never picked couch? That's pretty bizarre. One failed, 4 passed. Oh. There we go. 2 failed. I hadn't saved both files. Okay. So now if I want to fix that, I have to fix it here and down in test get prepositional phrase. So how about if instead of doing that, I make these globals. Now, you've heard me say bad things about globals, and that's true. Oops, that didn't re-indent. That's painful. Okay. But in this case, these are values that I'm going to use in multiple places in my program. It makes sense to have them be globals, okay? So now in getNoun, when I refer to single nouns, it's that global variable. And now when I refer to single nouns in test get prepositional phrase, it's this global value. And now I can add, I have a hard time writing couch. I should have picked an easier word to type. Okay, now I can fix it in one place and my test pass again. But let's suppose I come over here. Whoops. Okay. Suppose I come over here and now I add baseball. Well, I can add it to my function, but I still have to add it to my test, right? So that's still 2 changes driven by 1 conceptual change. I forgot to save both files, but it should pass anyway. Okay. So really there's one step further I could go, and let's go ahead and get these as well. In the test they don't matter so much. But overall, for running the program, I really want these to be all globals, right? So verbs, nouns, determiners, prepositions. Oh, that works. Good. Okay. So now I have no local lists in my tests. They're all global lists. Whoops, except that I forgot to take prepositions out of there and determiners out of there. All right. Test still passes. But how about if we go one step further? Now, this gets into an interesting realm of testing, but how about if we take those from there and put them into sentences? And then I can take these lists so I have to rewrite that one a little bit. Helps if I write it correctly. Okay. And now I can take these out of here, and I can take these out of here, and I can take these out of there, Whoops, and there's one more step I need. Do you remember what it is? I need to import those lists. Single determiners, plural determiners, single nouns, plural nouns, past verbs, present single verbs, present plural verbs, line's getting too long, future verbs. And so now all of my lists are in one place, and I can run my test, and it did not work. Prepositions is not defined. I forgot to import it. Okay. There we go. That passes, and I can still do sentences. And now we see if I want to add a word to any of my lists, I just add it once. Is that how you spell parakeet? Not at all sure. And everything still runs. Now, the problem with this, and I said that we were wandering into a dangerous area, and that is I'm now mixing my operational code and my test code. And if you do that too much, you can invalidate your test by using something that breaks the same in both places and doesn't produce an error. But in terms of just using the data, that's probably pretty safe. All right? So that's one thing we can do, and that gets this test into much better shape. Certainly having the global list here is a good idea. Whether sharing the global list with the code is a good idea, you kind of have to think about that a little. But it certainly simplifies this to have the global lists. Now back over here, notice that I have written 12 statements to produce 12 sentences. It works. It's not bad. But we could be a little more elegant. In the first place, how about if we made a function called create sentence, number, tense. Oh. And use prep equals false. So I'm going to give that a default value. And I'm going to say, I'm going to steal one of these. This now becomes return, get determiner number, get noun number, get verb number, tense, get prepositional phrase number. Now, again, that gets a little long, so it turns out I need a continuation character there. Okay, so that's not so long. So now I've got this create sentence that calls each of these functions, and so now I can just say let's do a little keyboard magic. Having to do a little bit too much magic here. Whoops. Okay. so this is now create sentence. Oops. And that probably broke my macro. Yep. If I can hit the right set of keys here, it'd probably be quicker to re-record the macro. All right, let's re-record the macro. I know. Going to all this work to be cool, right? But see, it makes those go a lot faster. And I should have done the second set here with and I forgot to conditionalize this correctly. Ret val equals that. If use prep ret val plus equals why is that? Oh, it's because I've got one too many spaces there. Now, continuation line missing indentation or outdented. So somehow it doesn't like that continuation line. Let's try that. Oh, that didn't make it any happier. Oh, I've got an extra close. Okay, that's the problem. It's the close paren there. Alright, so we've gotten rid of all the warnings. And so this allows me to reduce the amount of code here by calling this function. And in fact, this is such an important extension that I gave extra points for this one. So let's see. Uh-oh. Forgot one teeny tiny detail here. Forgot to print anything out. There we go. So I'm still getting the correct sentences here. Test sentences still works, which it should, because I haven't touched any of the stuff that's being tested. There's still one more problem here, though. Why do I have to call this 12 times? Isn't that why we have loops? So let's do for number in 1, 2, for tense in past, present, future for there are other ways I could write this, but we'll just number. Okay, now I only have one call to create sentence, which makes this more compact. Now I've changed the order of the sentences, and so it does look a little bit different. Actually, I guess if I wrapped this as the outermost one, then they'd get the same order. Okay, there we go. Oh, and then actually I need to change these two to get the exact same order. How about that? I tend to think of these in the opposite order that I loop them, which is interesting, isn't it? And so this, using the loops here, makes this code much simpler. And in fact, you could almost say create sentence doesn't add anything in terms of simplicity here, except that it makes my top level loop very simple. I can see exactly what I want to do. I'm going to loop over these conditions and I'm going to call create sentence. And then the details of create sentence with having to check the conditional and everything is hidden from the top level. One more issue down here. Inside of get verb. Actually, let's do the easy one. Let's do get prepositional phrase. A lot of you got this, but some of you didn't. And I would see this turn in. If quantity equals 1, do this, else do this. Well, remember, all I'm doing is I'm taking quantity here. So instead of having a condition here, I can just say quantity. And I could just say return that. So there's no benefit in checking quantity because I'm just going to pass it on to get determiner and get noun. All right. Now let's go to get verb. You may have been told that you should never check all the cases that you expect to get. So the tenses I expect are past, present, and future. And so at the very most, or at the very least, I guess I should say, this should be just an else, because the only other tense that I expect is future, and if somebody gives me a tense that I'm not expecting, it'll just treat it as if it were future. The reason why this is important here, by the way, is if somebody passed me preterite, for example, words would not have a value at this point, and so I would get a crash on this line. Now there's several different ways to deal with that, but for the moment, the easiest and laziest one is just to say anything that's not past or present is going to be future. So that's the first thing. But you'll also notice here you're checking present grammatical number equals 1 and grammatical number not equal to 1. So I'm having to check present twice and number twice. So what this should be in terms of programming practice is if grammatical number equals 1, else, and so I know that the tense is present because I've checked it up here. Now the only question is whether it's grammatical number equals 1, and anything other than 1 is going to be present plural verbs. Okay, that took a lot longer than I expected, and that's why I didn't want to explain it for each one of you. But remember about using loops to simplify your code, using functions even if it's just to abstract an operation so that you can see more clearly at this level what you're doing. In the context of what we're talking about, there's not much question about what create sentence is going to do. And so it's much more explanatory to do it this way than to write the code in line here. Be careful when you find yourself checking the same condition multiple times. In the case of tense, it's got 3 values. We're going to have to check it at least twice. But in terms of grammatical number, there's no reason to check grammatical number twice, so we've nested inside of the check for tense. And when you're passing through a variable, don't check to see what its value is, just pass it through, unless there's some validity check that you would need to make at this point. The globals, that's potentially a bad thing because I'm sharing data between the code and the test, although in this case it's probably pretty safe. Excuse me. When you're testing a random condition, test it a bunch of times. I mean, is that overkill? Yes, that's overkill. But remember, the computer's so fast, you're not going to notice running those a few extra times. The difference between 10/100ths of a second, 13/100ths of a second is not enough to worry about, and you've got a more robust test. And finally, again, when you're repeating code, think about whether you could break it out into a function or create a loop, do something to cut down on the repetition. All right? Well, thanks for watching. Sorry that took